Hello, TI communities. This is Sarah over in Urban Palms, and I hope everyone is enjoying their New Year's. I hope everyone's had a safe and happy New Year. And today we are going to talk about some more things related to safety, which is domestic violence safety. Okay, so let's define abuse, right? Domestic violence is also referred to as intimate partner violence, IPV. It's dating abuse or relationship abuse. It's a pattern of behaviors by one partner to maintain power and control over another partner in an intimate relationship. Notice this definition is talking about partners. It's not saying a man or a woman because it can be prevalent in same sex relationships, and it doesn't also necessarily have to be the man abusing the woman. It does go both ways. There are many forms of abuse and domestic violence, which we'll talk about here. Okay. So, domestic violence doesn't discriminate. People of any age, any race, age, gender, sexuality, religion, education level, or economic status can be a victim or a perpetrator of domestic violence. That includes behaviors that physically harm, intimidate, manipulate, or control a partner or otherwise force them to behave in ways that they don't want to, including through physical violence, threats, emotional abuse, or financial control. Multiple forms of abuse are usually present at the same time in an abusive relationship. Um, and it's essential to understand these behaviors, how they interact, so you know what to look for. Okay. And so that's how we're going to start our conversation is let's make sure we really understand what domestic violence is before we go into what can actually be done about it. Okay. So let's go over these myths versus truths. Okay. So, first myth says domestic and family violence only occurs in working or poor families. This is not true. The truth is, domestic and family violence happens in all communities from all social and cultural groupings. Next myth is violent men cannot control themselves. Their behavior is out of their control. Okay. The truth is, if men cannot control their violent behaviors, they would try to dominate and control everything and everybody, including their bosses, their work friends, and all other people they come into contact with. But oftentimes, these relationships um, are just in their romantic relationships or their family relationships, right? So that that shows you that these days, you know, they can figure it out. It's just sometimes we just need a little help. Okay. Next myth is women enjoy being abused. Otherwise, they would leave the situation. Right? That's not necessarily true. There are many reasons why women do not leave violent situations. They fear isolation, community stigma, financial problems, and also after a long term abuse, their self esteem is very low. They do not have the support system to build their confidence, oftentimes. Okay. Next myth loving, caring partners do not use violence. Violence can happen even in the most loving and caring relationships. That's the truth. Next myth only small numbers of women have experienced domestic and family violence. The truth is, 1 in 3 to 5 women will experience domestic and family violence. Next myth is alcohol and stress are to blame for domestic violence. Okay. Truthfully, alcohol and stress are not an excuse for domestic violence. It only acts as an excuse. It's up to the person who commits domestic violence to accept responsibility. That really goes for any actions that are held when someone is under the influence of alcohol or stress. There really is no excuse. We need to be aware of our weaknesses, and if alcohol and stress is one of them, then we need to get that in check and figure out how do we do better. Okay. Next myth, domestic violence is rarely spoken about. It's a private family matter. The truth is, domestic violence is a crime and it's not a part of any healthy relationship. It's not a secret. It's not something that's common and we just don't talk about it. No, it is a crime. It is not okay. Next myth is domestic violence only happens when there's unemployment and poverty in the family. Again, not true. Women and people, I should say, from all backgrounds, all ages, all cultures, employed and unemployed, are still likely to be victims of domestic violence. Myth, women know their rights and can leave the situation if they want to. The truth is, a strong sense of silence and secrecy often goes with domestic violence. Women fear speaking out. The violence causes low self esteem, and no one wants their family to break up. Most women just hope that the violence will stop, and maybe they don't know what resources are out there either. Okay, maybe they're scared, maybe they've been threatened, and they don't want to risk utilizing their resources, especially if there's children involved, right? We don't want to put risk to our children either. Okay. Next myth, some women provoke violence and they are part of the problem. The truth is, no family deserves violence. Dealing with problems in ways that don't involve violence is key, not blaming the victim. Okay? The fact is, nowadays, you actually do come across domestic violence situations where women abuse men, men abuse women. Maybe there's a situation where a woman puts her hands on the man first, and the man, being much stronger, dominates that woman and can hurt her badly. That woman, just because she put her hands on that man, doesn't mean she deserves that treatment. Okay. Now, there are actions that she took that should be acknowledged as well. Okay. So just because someone was hurt worse does not mean that the other person was not abused. Okay, there are signs of abuse from coming from both parties in that particular situation. So that's just something to be aware of. Doesn't matter who's stronger, who quote unquote wins, no family deserves violence. So what is domestic violence? What is this abuse? It comes in various ways, okay? There is physical abuse. That's the more obvious: kicking, slapping, hitting, punching, pushing, pulling, choking, property damage, right? There's emotional abuse that could come out in rages of jealousy, anger, intimidation, controlling behaviors, neglectful behaviors, maybe some humiliation, threats, isolation, and verbal abuse. So, all of that outright abuse that's not necessarily physical, but with words, and can come out with many of these emotions, or commands, like, commanding someone to be isolated. Social abuse. That's when you're being stopped from meeting or seeing your friends and family. You're not allowed to leave the home, or you're even being stalked. Okay, you might think that sounds crazy, but it does happen where someone does pursue a social life even when they're in a abusive relationship, and suddenly the person who they're in that relationship with is following them, knows where they are all the time, maybe tracking their phone. That is stalking, and that is a form of social abuse. Sexual abuse. That's forcing or coercing sexual acts, rape, having sex without wanting to. This also includes reproductive coercion. Okay. So if, maybe you are in a marriage and you want to be on birth control because you've already had a child or don't want to have a child, and, if you are in a situation where your partner is not allowing you to use that birth control, or is commanding that you are having sex without condoms, that is reproductive coercion, and that is a form of sexual abuse. Economic abuse is controlling access to money and other resources. So if someone's forced to live without money, they're probably not going to feel very confident about leaving a situation without money, right? And then the last but not least is digital abuse. And digital abuse is the use of technology and the internet to bully, harass, stalk, intimidate, or control a partner. This behavior often forms a It often comes in the form of verbal or emotional abuse conducted online. So, some things to consider with digital abuse, okay? You never have to share your passwords with everyone. You're not required to do that. Okay. So this is kind of going over what you should know for yourself for digital abuse, but you can also keep this in mind if you're seeing a friend or a family member going through something like this. These are signs of digital abuse. So, going back to this, not having to share your passwords with anyone, um, that's it's very common that oh, we just share passwords and whatever, right? But you know, we check people's messages and stuff like that. That's not an actual healthy behavior, okay? And that can be a form of digital abuse, okay? So remember, you never have to share your passwords with everyone. You never have to send any explicit videos, messages, pictures, anything that you're uncomfortable sending, which can also count as sexting, right? Sexting can have legal consequences. Nude photos or videos of somewhere under the age of 18 could be considered child pornography. So that is illegal to own or distribute. So if you are someone who is a teenager, you are underage. You do not need to be sexting. Okay. It's okay to turn off your phone and not respond to messages right away. You have the right to your own privacy. All right. Be sure that people who might need to reach you in an emergency still have a way to, but it's okay to not immediately be available from your phone. Save or document any threatening messages, photos, videos, or voicemails as evidence of abuse. Don't answer calls from unknown or blocked numbers. Your abuser may try calling you from another line if they suspect that you're avoiding them. Find out if your phone company will allow you to block numbers. There's plenty of apps out there that allow you to block numbers, so that shouldn't be too hard. Once you share or post a message, it's no longer under your control. So, abusive partners may save or forward anything you share. So, be careful sending content you wouldn't want others to see. That includes like posting statuses on social media, right? Know and understand your privacy settings. Social media platforms allow users to take control of how their information is shared and who has access to it. They're often customizable and they may be found in your privacy section of the website. If you need any help with that, feel free to leave a comment and I will be sure to help you. Keep in mind that some apps may require to change your privacy settings in order to use them. Be mindful when checking in places online, either by sharing your location in the post or by posting a photo with distinguishable backgrounds. Um, so, you don't always want to post where you are, especially if you're getting out of a domestic violence situation. Ask your friends to always seek permission from you before posting content that could compromise your privacy and do the same for them. That's my favorite thing. Don't, before you're taking pictures, before you're posting, you never know what someone's go through. Ask them if it's okay for you to post and avoid contact with your abuser in any capacity. Okay. Now, these are a mix of tips for someone who might be in a domestic violence situation or if you are getting out of a domestic violence situation. So, but definitely wanted to touch on the digital abuse because digital abuse is relatively new. Since we are now in the age of social media and internet and data and phone and texting and all that, right? So I just wanted to make sure I touched on that a little bit more in depth. So there are some common signs of abusive behavior in a partner. Even if one or two of these behaviors is in a relationship, it's a red flag, and you need to pay attention to it so that you can try to avoid the abuse getting worse. So if someone's telling you you never do anything right, they show extreme jealousy of your friends or time spent away from them, preventing or discouraging you from spending time with friends, family, or peers, insulting you, demeaning you, shaming you, especially in front of other people, preventing you from making your own decisions, including about working or attending school, and controlling finances in the household without discussion, including taking your money or refusing to provide money, for necessary expenses. So this might not be happening to you, but maybe you notice, You have a friend that she can't really go out with you when you want to because she says her boyfriend doesn't want her to go, or maybe she doesn't have the money to go, right? And it seems to always be an issue. This might be a sign of some sort of domestic violence situation. So let's go over some causes and excuses, okay? Excuses, not justifications, but things that, might either cause a domestic violence situation or might be something that someone uses as their excuse, right? So financial pressure on the family causing stress, drug and alcohol abuse by one or more family members, gambling by either partner, abuse with the extended families, generational abuse. So if it's not uncommon for someone to see abuse in their home and then again have abuse in their own home. Like if a boy sees his mom being abused, he might then abuse his wife. Typical and acceptable male behaviors, cultural acceptable behaviors. There are some cultures where women are seen to be inferior, and sometimes it is acceptable to physically put that in place. And that is a can be used as an excuse or a cause for domestic violence. Okay. Financial pressures. Some of these are a little repetitive. Financial pressure, in particular, the financial pressure of supporting relatives in the home country and the pressure of unemployment. Gambling, changes in women's attitudes, expectations, or roles. So, maybe there's a woman in the home who wants to go back to work and suddenly this triggers something. Relationship difficulties, including issues relating to the children, which were seen to put pressure on relationships, may lead to domestic violence. Cultural differences, especially in the context of mixed marriages, prov- um, provocation from the women experiencing the freedom of women's rights. Okay, so here are some um, outlined, just a little graph here about what you can see in a healthy relationship, an unhealthy relationship, and an abusive relationship. So healthy relationships means you and your partner are communicating, you're respectful, you're trusting, you're honest, you're equal, you're enjoying personal time away from each other, you're making mutual choices, and you are economic and financial partners. That can be seen in many things. Okay, there are many steps to a relationship, right? You date, eventually maybe get engaged, get married, have kids, whatever, order things might go for you, the economic commitment is going to change. You don't have that commitment at the beginning. But as it becomes a factor, there might be, you want to be more of a partnership. Some signs that you're in an unhealthy relationship is if your partner is not communicating, if they're disrespectful, not trusting, dishonest, trying to take control, you only spend time together, you're pressured into activities, and you're unequal economically. Taking it to the next level. So these unhealthy signs might just be warning signs for an abusive relationship. All right. So an abusive relationship is occurring when one partner is communicating in a hurtful or threatening way. So that's a little different than not communicating, where they don't talk at all. But if you're communicating in a hurtful or threatening way, you're most likely in an abusive relationship. You're being mistreated or you are mistreating, accusing the other of cheating when it's untrue, denying actions that are abusive, controlling behaviors, and then isolating your partner from others. These are signs of an abusive relationship. Okay. And so this goes a little bit into detail, right? So in a healthy relationship, if you're communicative, you talk openly about problems, you listen to one another, you respect each other's opinions, if you're being respectful, again, you value each other's opinions, your feelings, your needs, you give each other the freedom to be yourself, be loved for who you are. You're trusting, right? You don't need to prove that each other's telling the truth. You're honest with each other, but you can still keep some things private, right? Equal, so you make decisions together, you hold each other to the same standards, you have an equal say in regards to major decisions in your relationships, and everyone has access to the resources they need. You're setting boundaries. You enjoy spending time apart or alone or with others, right? You respect each other's needs For time and space apart, you communicate with each other about what you are and aren't comfortable with. You're practicing consent, right? And you're being supportive. So you really need to understand what a healthy relationship looks like to understand what an unhealthy relationship might look like. Okay, so if your partner is uncommunicative, non communicative, so when problems arise, you either fight or you don't discuss them at all, it's not healthy. They're being disrespectful, they're inconsiderate, their behavior is inconsiderate towards you. They don't trust you, so they refuse to believe in anything that you tell them is true, or they feel entitled to invade your privacy. They're dishonest, so you see that they're lying or obscuring facts, omitting truths, right? Taking control, so they try to take steps to suggest that your desires or choices, that their own desires and choices are more important than yours. They might try to isolate you, try to restrict you from contact with other people. And that doesn't necessarily mean that they say, oh, I don't want you to hang out with that person. Maybe you're noticing that every time you want to hang out, there's a problem. Okay. Every time I want to hang out with my friend, now there's a problem, or this comes up, or he needs this, and he just constantly is taking my time. It doesn't seem like a problem because it's all fun activities. But if you're feeling like, wow, I'm really not able to see anyone else but this person, you might be getting isolated, and you might be in an unhealthy relationship. Now sometimes people just need, some people, sometimes someone's just clingy and you need to talk to them, but in that case you try to communicate with them in a respectful way, right? You try to be honest with them. If you're not able to do that, you might be in an unhealthy relationship. Unhealthy doesn't necessarily always mean abusive, but it can lead to that. You are being pressured into sexual activity. So if your partner uses pressure or guilt against you so that you will so they can coerce you into sexual acts or reproductive choices, ignoring your boundaries. So if you tell them, hey, you know, I need you to leave me alone while I'm studying, but they ignore that, that's ignoring a boundary. If it's assumed or implied that one partner is responsible for making informed decisions, that's them making that decision too. Well, Sarah said she needs space while she's studying, but I don't care. And I'm going to ignore that. And I'm going to decide that that's not important. It's not okay. And then unequal economically. So finances aren't discussed, right? Financial decisions are made unilaterally. So it's assumed that only one partner is in charge of finances. Sometimes that's the way a relationship is actually set up. Some people prefer that. But if you're not even, if you're not even having that option, while you've tried to have that option, then there might be a problem. Okay, so in an abusive relationship, we're going to go over these. They're communicating harmfully, they're mistreating others, right? They make untrue accusations. So a lot of things of proving your trustworthiness, a lot of, asking to hand over passwords, jealousy issues might come up. They want to control the other person. So there's no equality in your relationship. One person makes all the decisions. Isolating others, again, right? So your partner controls where you travel, who you talk to, who you spend time with. Often includes physical or emotional isolation from your family and friends. Maybe they force sexual activities or control reproductive choices. If your partner is forcing you to or pressure you to engage in sexual activity you don't want to, if your partner controls your reproductive choices by sabotaging birth control or by pressuring you to have or not have children, this is sexual abuse. They're controlling your finances. Again, your partner controls the money and access to resources, including preventing you from earning an income or accessing their own income. Having an open and respectful dialogue about finances is not an option. Okay, so you want to be able to have that conversation. Even if that's the decision that, okay, you will control these bills, the conversation should be able to be had. If they manipulate children. So if your partner's using children to gain power or control over you, including telling them lies or basic criticisms about you, that is abusive. So you can kind of see how, these examples are very similar. They all touch on the same things, but, these are signs of it being unhealthy, like things just aren't discussed, but then straight up, here you're being abused and they're not even letting you be a part of the conversation or make your own money or see your family or friends, right? So, what are some indicators that someone might be in a domestic violence situation? Hopefully you're picking up on some of these and we'll go through them a little quick. Physical injuries like broken bones, no explanation for injuries, um, threats to safety, intimidation or harassment, Current or previous police involvement. So if you happen to know that, that you've seen the police around, or they had the police around, or they don't seem to be too phased by, oh yeah, police came to my house, feelings of sadness, depression, or low self-esteem, difficulty in concentrating or focus, being denied access to funds or resources, or repeated requests for financial assistance. So maybe someone's really struggling, but like, well, you both work. Why are you struggling financially, right? Overprotective of children and avoidance of discussing children, current or previous separation in the relationship, extensive use of medications, again, lack of self esteem or self confidence, problems with sleep or sleeplessness, nervous or withdrawn behavior, aggressive behaviors or language, isolation from friends, family, and community, medical or psychosomatic illnesses such as headaches or stomach problems, frequent visits to the hospital or doctor, eating disorders, difficulties with friendships. Those are all some signs that you might know someone in a domestic violence situation. So, how do abusers manipulate and control victims? Okay, this is it's the wheel of power and control. Okay, and our abusers might use coercions and threats. They might use intimidation, emotional abuse, isolation, minimizing, denying, or blaming, using the children, or male privilege, even. And then, of course, the economic abuse. So, this kind of goes into each one. Okay, so let's start with coercion and threats, right? This is the wheel of power control. So using coercion and threats is making her and/or carrying out threats to do something to hurt her, threatening to leave her, to commit suicide, to report her to welfare, making her drop charges, making her do illegal things. Okay, so these are some examples, right? Maybe using intimidation, making someone afraid by using looks or actions, gestures. Okay, so domestic violence is literally a series of tactics and actions used to control someone else. And these are the tactics. They might use emotional abuse. You might be putting the person down, making them feel bad about themselves, name calling, making them think they're crazy, playing mind games, making them feel guilty, humiliating them, right? Using isolation, controlling what she does or who she sees, who she talks to, what she reads, where she goes, and limiting her outside involvement, and using jealousy to justify actions. Minimizing, denying, and blaming, making fight, making light of the abuse and not taking her concerns about it seriously, right? Saying this abuser didn't happen, shifting responsibility for the abusive behavior, saying she caused it. Using the children, making her feel guilty about the children, using the children to relay messages, using visitation to harass her, threatening to take away the children. Using male privilege, treating her like a servant, making all the big decisions, acting like the master of the castle, being the one to define men's and women's roles. And the last one, and really one of the biggest ones, is the economic abuse, preventing her from getting or keeping a job, making her ask for money, giving her an allowance, taking her money, not letting her know about or have access to family income. Why are these called the wheel? Why is this called the wheel of power and control? It's because this really helps us understand why people stay in abusive relationships. Okay, there are countless reasons why people stay in their relationships. And no matter the circumstances, the survivor does deserve to be supported in their decision making and empowered to reclaim their own lives. So it's really helpful if we understand why people stay in abusive relationships. It could be because of fear, right? What are the consequences if they leave, especially if there's physical abuse involved and this person is threatening, oh, I'll kill you if you leave me, right? Normalized abuse, that's the generational abuse, or even just seeing it around you. So if you grew up in an environment where abuse was common, you might not know what a healthy relationship looks like. Shame. So even just admitting that you're in this situation, you might feel like you did something wrong, that you deserve to be abused, that the abuse is a sign of weakness. So shame is a reason why they might stay. Intimidation. So, going back to the fear of the physical threats, the verbal threats, threats to spread information, maybe revenge porn or for LGBTQ communities, if you haven't come out yet, that could be a threat that is that comes up in the situation. Having low self-esteem. So after experiencing verbal abuse or blame for physical abuse, it can be easy for survivors to believe those sentiments and believe that they're at fault. There's a lack of resources. So survivors are financially dependent on their abuser, then, or they may have been denied opportunities to work somewhere, place to sleep on their own. Maybe they need language assistance still. So not having that network to turn to is going to make it feel really impossible for someone to leave an abusive situation. A disability. So if someone is depending on other people for physical support, they might feel like their well-being is directly tied to that relationship. Immigration status. So people who are undocumented may fear that reporting abuse will affect their immigration status. And then again, having that language barrier can become a factor. Cultural context. So traditional customs or beliefs that may influence someone's decision to stay in a abusive relationship, whether that's held by the survivor, by the family, or the community. It's helpful if you can learn more about abuse in different cultural contexts. Having the children, right? So many survivors feel guilty or responsible for disrupting their family unit. Keeping the family together may not be something that a survivor may value, but also as a tactic by their partner used um, used to guilt a survivor into staying. And then love, experiencing abuse and feeling genuine care for a person who's causing harm are not mutually exclusive. So survivors often still have strong, intimate feelings for their partner. They may have children together, they might want to maintain their family, or the abuser might just be charming. Their survivor might hope that they will return to being that person that they were at the beginning of the relationship. A lot of times, people who are abusers are are acting out due to their own emotional trauma. And if you love that person and you are understanding that trauma, um, it can be hard to separate the two and realize that although you might love this person, the way they're treating you is not them loving themselves or loving you. And so sometimes you really need to just take that step and separate yourself, even when there is love there. So, how do we talk to someone who is in an abusive relationship? Okay, right? Discussing relationship abuse with someone who's actively experiencing an abusive situation is never easy. There are some basic ways to facilitate an affirming conversation to meet a survivor where they're at, even though each situation is unique. So you want to acknowledge that they're in a difficult and scary situation. Let them know that the abuse is not their fault. Reassure them that they're not alone and that there's help and support available, including from yourself. Be supportive and listen. It will be difficult for them to talk about the abuse. Telling the survivors that they can and can't what they can and cannot do will only serve to isolate and disempower them further. Your first priority should always be to support them with what they need to make their own decisions. Be non judgmental, okay? Respect the decision that a person makes. There are many resources or reasons why they might stay in an abusive situation. They might leave and return to the relationship many times. Remember not to criticize their decisions or guilt them. They'll need your support even more in those moments. Keep in mind that experiencing some shame and guilt from friends and family may not only widen the gap between their support system, but also further expand the isolation tactic that their partner may already perpetrate in the relationship. Remember that you cannot rescue them, okay? I know it's very difficult to watch someone you care about get hurt, but ultimately they're only right to make a decision. They're the only one with the right to make a decision about what to do. It's important to support them no matter what they decide, even if you don't agree. Remember that abuse that abuse is about power and control, and making decisions for them can only add to the disempowerment they're already experiencing from their partners. Help them develop a safety plan. Okay. The last slide does have information about what that is. Encourage them to participate in activities with friends and families. Helping survivors identify and build support networks can help them recognize alternatives to the abusive situations they're experiencing and build the confidence they need to leave the relationship. And encourage them to talk to people who can offer further help. Identify local service providers or counseling or support, and reach out um, about to a referral to a program near you. Okay, so we've talked a lot about how to support someone you care about if they're being abused. But what if the person you care about is being abusive towards their partner? What if there's a member of your own family that can be of your own family, right? This can be an incredibly difficult situation to deal with. You might love your family member, but you know that what they're doing is harmful. It's important to remember that you have the power to be an active bystander. Ultimately, your family member is the only person who can choose to stop the abuse, but there are ways to support them. So here are a few things you can do to encourage them to behave in healthier ways. One is to educate yourself on the dynamic of domestic violence and abuse. Abuse is about power and control, and the signs are not obvious. Learning the warning signs of abuse can help you help your family identify their abusive and unhealthy behaviors. If you witness behaviors that you feel are unhealthy or abusive, try not to be silent about them. You might say things like, "I don't think it's healthy to talk to your partner that way." Or, "If you care about someone, I think you should respect them." Avoid blaming the victim or excusing abusive behaviors. If you witness the abuse, or if a family member tells you about a time when they've been abused, or when they behave abusively, try not to place blame on their partner or make excuses for that abuse. For example, avoid saying things like, "Well, what did you do to make you act that way?" Or, "You couldn't help it." There's no excuse for abuse. It's a choice, and it's one that no one has that it's one that no one has to make. Although you may care about your family member, it's important on identifying the abusive behaviors, even if their partner stays in the relationship. That doesn't mean they deserve to be abused, right? We talked a little bit about that. You're turning against, remember, you're not turning against your family member. You're just trying to help them have a healthy relationship. And some of these things can go for if you are talking to the one that's being abused as well, right? So you don't want to say like, "Well, what did you do for them to act that way?" Or, "Oh, she couldn't help it." No, this is not an excuse. This is not okay. Realize that you can't make them change. Okay, this is for you. And this is really if you're talking to an abuser or someone who's being abused. You can't save or fix another person. It's up to them to decide that they want to make a change. Acknowledging that their behavior is abusive is the first step, and change can be a long and difficult process. Encourage them to seek professional help or to reach out to a confidential, non-judgmental hotline. Remind them that the effects that their abusive behaviors are having on their partner and family. And remember, your family member's decision to abusive is not a reflection on you. And this last one's going to be very important. Practice self-care. It can be very difficult to know that someone you care about is an abusive partner or is in an abusive relationship. You might feel stressed or emotionally drained. That's totally normal. You have the right to take a step back from the situation when you need to, and practice lots of self-care. By self-care, we mean doing things you enjoy or that help you feel calm and relaxed. Your own well-being is important, and you can't put energy into supporting others if you aren't taking care of yourself. Sometimes the best thing to do in these situations is to give someone resources and then walk away yourself. You have to keep in mind you could be potentially putting yourself in a dangerous situation as well when trying to help someone get out of a domestic violence situation. And so, talking about helping someone or witnessing domestic violence in public, it's important to take into account your own safety as well as the survivors. There is safety in numbers, so gathering a group of people to stand nearby, either verbally or physically intervene is one option. Contacting the authorities is another option. You might even record the incident with your phone to pass it to law enforcement if the survivor chooses to press charges. So these are tips for if you are witnessing a domestic violence situation. If you're hearing suspicious noises from your neighbors, one option is to speak with the survivor in person the next day. You might greet them with a question like, "Hey, I heard some stuff last night. Are you okay?" And make sure to approach them in a safe and private space. Listen to them carefully and believe what they have to say. Never blame them or ask them what they did to provoke their partner. Let them know that the abuse isn't their fault and that they deserve support. You might direct them to a local crisis hotline. If you are concerned for the survivor's immediately safety or your own, you do have the right to contact the police. If the survivor does decide to press charges against the abusive partner, your statement can be a way for them to help document what they've experienced. Often, family members or friends want to physically remove the survivor from the abusive partner because they won't leave themselves. This is strongly discouraged because that action, like the abuse, encroaches on the survival's autonomy. It's understandable to want to step in and take care of someone you love, but it is important to remember that they are the only person who could decide what is right for them. This is a choice they must make on their own. Witnessing domestic violence can be difficult, but you can't save them or fix the situation. The hardest thing to realize is that even with your help, some people won't ever leave the relationship, and they do have the right to make that choice. You also have the right to express your concern, offer support, ask them to talk about a safety plan with you, and refer them to those who can help. With all that being said, it's important to have hope. On average, it takes domestic violence survivors 7 times to leave the relationship for good. So if it's physically or emotionally safe for you to try to continue support in any way you can, then go right ahead. But believing and supporting them can be a major factor in helping them stay safe or helping them find empowerment to leave when they are ready. It can be difficult though. And if it's too difficult for you, you have the right to say, "Hey, reach out to me when you are ready, but I have to step away right now." So get help, share resources, okay? A lot of this information was found on the hotline.org. So you can go to https, www.thehotline.org. You can also call 1-800-799-SAFE. That's 1-800-799-7233 and create a safety plan. Okay, there's resources on the website, or if you call this number to create your safety plan. A safety plan is a personalized, practical plan to improve your safety while experiencing abuse, preparing to leave an abusive situation, or after you leave. This plan includes vital information tailored to your unique situation, and it will help you prepare for and respond to different scenarios, including telling your friends and family about the situation, coping with emotions, and various resources suited to your individual circumstances. Some of the preparations for a safety plan might seem obvious, but it can be hard to think clearly or make logical decisions during moments of crisis. So having a safety plan laid out in advance can really help protect yourself in other high stress situations. There's many resources out there. I really like this website. It'll create a very personalized, individualized safety plan. You can take into account pets, children, location, technology. It really helps you think everything through, and then they email you your safety plan at the end. They also have like the X's are readily available on the website so that you can quickly exit out if you are creating a safety plan while and your abuser is around. You can easily X out. Okay. So I do really hope that this was helpful, and I hope that you will take the opportunity to educate yourselves on domestic violence and to stay safe, and help others stay safe as well. So I hope this was helpful, and I hope everyone is having a wonderful new year. Let this be a good start to loving ourselves and being safe and happy this New Year's 2021.